Well, if you talk to EU leaders about what they would try to do if this happened, is they would want to end whatever momentum to further referendums and a breakup of the EU. They don't see Brexit as the biggest risk. They see breakup as the biggest risk. You could have 5 or 6 other referendum in other countries. And so what they would try to do is deepen the EU, get countries to rally around. But they may not have to worry so much any longer. The markets certainly have seen the polls moving in a good direction. It looks like the exit campaigners are losing the financial argument, and therefore the leave campaigners are turning more to emotional arguments and immigration arguments. One of the big stories this week was the largest increase of immigration in Britain in last year to 330,000 net. So it's going to become a more emotional appeal on the part of the Brexiters. As you mentioned, the pound is up, the markets are tracking the U.S. markets. So right now, if there's any danger, it could be complacency because people are starting to bake in a successful vote on June 23rd.
Fred, let's talk about the security argument as to what an exit might mean for Britain's safety in the world. Because, of course, there's an argument by the Remain camp that pulling out of the EU will hurt Britain's security. However, on the flip side, of course, Britain's got the 4th biggest military in the world. It's a leading member of NATO and the UN, and those factors won't change. So will there be any change in the security situation if Britain did leave?
One of the most interesting things about this national referendum is that you have so many people actually voting from the outside. You had President Obama coming to London. You have the G7 now making a statement from Japan. And so clearly the global economics of this, people are worried of a British fragmentation, of a populist surge from the political sense. And that gets to the security question. I think from a purely internal security question, Britain would still have very strong bilateral intelligence ties to the United States, would have great ties as well to other countries around Europe. I think the larger problem is not so much immediate security and terrorism, although they do get help from European intelligence agencies. It's more the marginalization of the UK. In the Leave campaign, people believe, well, we have the special relationship with the United States. That's going to be great. We have the English-speaking countries around the world. But we, at the Atlantic Council, released a letter from 13 foreign policy leaders, secretaries of state, secretaries of defense, national security advisors, and they said, don't count on that. The special relationship is partly special because the EU can deliver, because the UK can deliver, the EU is in the EU. A lot of its foreign partners will be less interested in it if it's not part of this larger body.
And Fred, just quickly, the arguments we've seen, of course, in the last sort of 6 months or so, that this huge swathe of migration into Europe from the Middle East and Africa, increasing security risks on continental Europe. Does that increase risks for the UK as well?
Whenever you have 4 civil wars in the Middle East sending millions of migrants abroad, it's also going to increase risks to the UK, including terrorist risks. I'm not sure they go fundamentally higher or lower depending on leave, but you can imagine that if anything happens between now and Election Day, and in general, it will help those that campaign, that are campaigning in terms of fear and emotion. In other words, it will help the Leave campaigners. If things stay quiet between now and Election Day, it looks like the trends in the arguments in voting, particularly pensioners now, because it has been pensioners and it has been the less wealthy that have been for Leave, and it has been young voters and wealthier voters that have been for Stay. But you're starting to see a shift now in older voters, and I think that has to do with growing fears of what might happen to their pensions and jobs if the Leave vote goes through.